I just want to say that despite the negativity towards the industry, there is still cause to be optimistic. 2018 is promising to deliver Metro Exodus, Bloodstained, Ni no Kuni 2, and Dynasty Warriors 9.
If only I knew what was to come. A couple of years ago, I completed one of my mammoth essays. The subject was the Order 1886, and why it was, to put it politely, a giant dumpster fire of a game. It had very little redeeming value once you got past the voice performances and the visuals, and the story and character presentation was extremely baffling, perfectly summarised by the killing of over 60 guards, moments after the main character said he would not harm innocent men. If you want my complete thoughts, my video on the game should satisfy your appetite, but that game is not what I am here for today. Rather, I want to go back to a point I made about bad games towards the beginning of said video. I came to the conclusion early on that there were two types of bad games that can be easily separated. Bad games that are needed in the industry, which depends on if they are entertaining or now have some historical significance, your Sonic 2006 kind, and the other type of bad games, those that have little reason to exist at all, your Sonic Boom kind. For a while, that was an easy way to categorise terrible games for me, because it was broad enough yet clearly defined. You could hand me any bad game and chances are that I would house them in one of those two camps. But very recently, something has come along so mind-bogglingly outrageous that I've had to rethink that philosophy. We can never anticipate nasty surprises in this industry, such as business practices and unwanted mechanics and features, and the same applies to how we describe games as an entertainment product, and yet at the same time a cultural art form. Within 10 years we've added kinesthetics, loot boxes, microtransaction, grubbing whales, that sort of sterile language corporations have put in our mouths when we talk about the medium we both love and hate. Love it for what it gives us, and hate it for what it takes away from us. As the years go by and trends like the Battle Royale genre and the modern military shooter come and go, new features get standardized, and technological game changers arrive, that dictionary of terms is only going to expand and get continuously redefined. And after much deliberation, after looking back at the near 2 decades I've played video games for, after checking my Steam library and physical disc collection, I have come to the conclusion that a third category of terrible games needs to be devised. So let's return to my previous definitions and compare them to my new category. First, you have the boring games, the Halo 5 Guardians type, where the game is fully functional but dull as dishwater. And then there's the ironically entertaining ones, your Ride to Hell and Atari ET types, where it's fascinating to play for both personal entertainment and historical purposes. And now, we have the total train wrecks. The bad games that are not only boring, but whose experience when playing them hurts you on an emotional level. The ones that make you incredibly upset. Not angry, upset. And that is where Dynasty Warriors 9 comes in. I'm going to start off by talking about how I write videos, because it's going to play into my essay's difficult starting point. I don't go into games looking for something to talk about. I did it before and it just led to horrible periods of burnout. It all starts with some sort of inspiration that can originate from anywhere and anything within a game or even outside of the medium. Game mechanics, presentation, controversy, anything can lead me towards a vague subject. From there, I narrow it down to a singular goal that I strive to achieve by the end of the video. From that goal, I write down objectives that will be completed throughout the video that will reinforce the goal achieved. It's a common starting point for academic essays, and I feel that writing down even the vaguest of objectives is invaluable when structuring a video. I bring this up because my overall goal of this video is to explain why Dynasty Warriors 9 is depressingly awful. But one of those objectives I wrote, and one that will be key for you to understand how I feel about this game, is to explain my feelings in a way that non-fans of the series will understand. I want to point this out because I want you all to be aware how difficult achieving that objective will be, and want to apologise in advance if I fail. I won't beat around the bush. The Warriors series as a whole is not for everyone. It is made for a very specific demographic with very specific tastes, and it's an extremely niche audience. They're a dedicated bunch that sees something in the series, despite evidence saying that it shouldn't have lasted this long. People bang on about Call of Duty sequels for being repetitive in mechanics, but the assets are different, the characters are different, the stories are different. There's enough that is different to make each game distinguishable, even after the quickest of glances. But Dynasty Warriors is very unique in that each numbered game is not a continuation of the series. Each rendition expands the stories, the amount of battles, the characters, and the variety of combat styles. Each game takes place in the Three Kingdoms period of China, and contains at least the Yellow Turban Rebellion, the Battle of Hulao Gate, the Battle of Guandu, the Battle of Chirbi, and the Battle of the Wujiang Plains. With each rendition comes more battles that take place before and after these key battles, with Dynasty Warriors 7 adding another 30 years of story to accommodate the neglected victors of the conflict. You could say that, in a way, Dynasty Warriors has been trying to remake and improve the very same game concept again and again for over 17 whole years. Each game has the same story, the same characters, same moments, and if you want a visualization of how the game has expanded from Dynasty Warriors 2, I'm going to show you a lovely little timeline. This is Dynasty Warriors 2. And here are the historical battles that are covered as represented by these lines. Here is Dynasty Warriors 4, Dynasty Warriors 6, and Dynasty Warriors 8 Complete Edition as it is on PC. The square triangle combo also expands and experiments with each game, adding an additional number of attacks and combo opportunities, weapon switching, and elemental effects which can lead to some devastating results. It's repetitive at its core, but also deeply entertaining. That's what's so captivating about Dynasty Warriors for me personally. It's a glorious presentation that doesn't do anything to enlighten you or teach you lessons about life and death. There are characters that die throughout the game, but those few somber moments are clouded by a combination of consistent action, unfitting music, and voice acting that doesn't try to take itself too seriously. I watch and interact with a lot of media. It's part of my job as a post-production specialist, and while I love art for telling stories in complex ways, I sometimes just want to kick back in my chair and indulge in some good, mindless fun. Doom 2016 is a great example of this, to the point that the player character actively ignores any form of complexity from their supporting characters. A combination of fast action, great music, and satisfying controls. A popcorn joyride. It's the equivalent of a grown-up water fight. Simply take out the exploration and quiet time in the game, and you have the template for Dynasty Warriors. It reminds me of my youth, when I didn't go into games expecting anything other than a fun time. A key example I use when I say something like, bigger doesn't mean more satisfying, is this series, because at its core, the Warriors series is the single most repetitive, recycled series that I love. I've played these games over the past 17 years, and I return to each new release to reset myself, to freshen the mind, to just have fun. I am aware of why this series is so reviled by the larger community, but I didn't care because I was having an enjoyable time. It's a series I can go into with very little expectations and come out satisfied. But not today. Not with Dynasty Warriors 9. Dynasty Warriors 9 may have had warm reception in Japan, but it has been lambasted by Western fans, and was cemented as the worst of the series within a very short amount of time.
What were Koei thinking with this one?
Some people have said it's the foundation for the next game in the series. It's like,
This has to be one of the least enjoyable moments in my life.
you do realize that this is a game, right? This is a finished product that people are paying $60 for.
It is a long time waiting for nothing to happen, and then a very short, insignificant anticlimax.
I got a few chapters in, and I am not finishing this game.
But I don't think it's bad. I think it's worse than that. I think it's the most unironically depressing game I have ever played, to the point that I was tempted to play the game with my hands covering my eyes, just so I could see less of it. But why is it bad? Well, let's take a look at it from a non-fan perspective. The problem with Dynasty Warriors 9 is that it's a Dynasty Warriors game, meaning bad voice acting, bland graphics, inconsistent technology, and repetitive play loops that plague the product. The technology is so inconsistent on PC, in fact, that it doesn't know what an Xbox 360 or an Xbox One controller is, unless you boot up the game via Steam's Big Picture mode. A majority of time playing the game will consist of riding a horse to the next location, or using an inconsistent fast travel system, where combat is in a permanent state of stop-start. Fight enemies for a short time, deal with travelling for a while, fight enemies, travel or encounter a time-wasting cutscene, rinse, repeat. Each core chapter is also quite long, and despite the game calling side missions optional, their completion is nonetheless required in order to have a fair chance at beating the designated final boss. It has Ubisoft-style towers that reveal nearby important landmarks and resources, vital to crafting weapons and buffs, and any visually distinct and unique locations are spread extremely thin in an open world that wouldn't look too out of place of a Unity asset flip product. This means chapters can take several hours to complete, since mission-critical objectives are also spread out thinly. Hunting is broken thanks to crap AI, fishing is dull, and resource gathering isn't required until you hit a grind wall at some point in a different chapter. That would be a great summary on the game to non-fans, but the video isn't about Dynasty Warriors 9 as a product. It's about why Dynasty Warriors 9 is depressing. Whilst the larger gaming crowds would say that the core of Dynasty Warriors' design is present in the game, I and many others who inhabit the small circle of fans would beg to differ. Outsiders say the biggest problem with Dynasty Warriors 9 is that it's a Dynasty Warriors game, but to fans, the biggest problem with Dynasty Warriors 9 is that it's not a Dynasty Warriors game. And now I have the difficult task in showing you why. When I was playing this awful game, a realization hit me about why I loved the previous installments despite their repetitive nature. There were several things, but it can be best summed up as presentation. It's vague, but when you compare DW9 to DW8, the differences between the two become much clearer. Dynasty Warriors 9 is a sterilized installment masquerading as progress, sacrificing its gaudy flashiness for an open world that added precisely nothing except literal hours of tedium. The main menu in 8 is replaced with one that could be made by any competent menu programmer in 10 minutes, the voice acting took a nosedive in performance quality, and like many other Unity asset flips, it has a crafting system, because the last thing Dynasty Warriors fans wanted was a crafting system that ties in with a resource gathering system. I am all for quiet time in games. It allows us to have a breather before the next explosion of excitement, and Dynasty Warriors 8 did have quiet time, but it was used to build up the battle that was about to happen. But Dynasty Warriors 9 mistakes quiet time for grinding. Now, let's go back to presentation. I mentioned that the voice acting took a nosedive in quality, but to non-fans that seems a bit paradoxical. The voice acting was already bad, they say, but there is a difference between bad voice acting and entertainingly bad voice acting. The writing in these games doesn't come within 10 miles of Silent Hill, but you can tell that the voice actors are not only trying to make something out of the trash they are given, but they are clearly having an enjoyable time acting it out. They're having fun, turning these romanticized characters from the source material into cartoon characters. Famed video game and anime voice actors like Yuri Lowenthal, Wendy Lee, Quinton Flynn, Matthew Mercer, and my personal favourite, Jameson Price, created distinct and recognisable voices that convey character and have become a key point of why I love this series. Dynasty Warriors 9 hired a different localization studio, and as a consequence, every character was recast. Even Terrence Stone, voice of cover character Zhao Yun since 2001's Kessen 2, and the only voice actor to perform in all games since Dynasty Warriors 4, wasn't in this game. Instead, you get this.
Even without Zhong Jiao, the Yellow Turbans continue to sow chaos throughout the land.
Surely, you know, as well as I do, Zhou Yu, nothing is worse than being left behind.
Their happiness is palpable. I am so glad for Master Liu Bei.
The flamboyance of the acting is gone, and what's replaced it comes across as amateur theatre extras. There's nothing entertaining about these voices. They're neither over the top nor hilariously bad. They sound like they wish they chose different career options. And keep in mind, this is by far the worst voice acting in the series. And keep in mind that the series had this.
The enemy is building a dike to the side of Fan Castle! A dike? Oh no!
And speaking of presentation, this is extended into characterization and cutscenes. Each cutscene, minus the very few exceptions, feel exactly the same. The same types of panning shots, the same animations. It reminds me of Final Fantasy XIV's cutscenes. But they can get away with it because Final Fantasy XIV is an MMORPG. Considering key events in this series have appeared across multiple games, you'd think Koei Tecmo would use these type of cutscenes for side quests, conversation exclusive, but these types of cutscenes sacrifice the impact of character introduction for the sake of time and resource saving. Let's compare two scenes side by side, each of the same event. The context is that Cao Cao here is trying to assassinate Don Zhuo, but he fails and is forced to escape. It is also the first time he gets to experience the might of Lu Bu, one of the most overpowered and iconic characters in the series, a man who can hold off 4 experienced generals and not break a sweat. Let's take a look at Dynasty Warriors 9's interpretation. The cinematography is flat and lifeless, it says nothing about the situation, and it's hard to believe that Cao Cao is in a dire situation. The introduction of Lu Bu's might is just him walking into frame, and his body language says nothing. Now, let's take a look at the same scene from DW8. Interesting cinematography and editing exists. We see the dire situation Cao Cao is in, the assassination attempt is open to interpretation, and Lu Bu doesn't say a word. We see how Cao Cao escapes and see that he is a very capable fighter. Guitars kick in, and Lu Bu demonstrates his skills by, well, the whole scene, right up to the final shot that cuts into gameplay, sets the tone and establishes character through actions rather than words. And sure, it's not the best writing, animation, cinematography, just about everything in video games, but as I've said before, presentation is what drives this series. The cutscenes are not great, but they aren't terrible. They are entertaining, and more importantly in this scene, sets up the most iconic character in the series. A character so iconic, he has his own theme song. There was love put into these games. And you know, I could have let a lot of things slide, even the open world, if they simply did a character and gameplay copy-paste from DW8. Dynasty Warriors 9 was supposed to be a game changer, an ambitious title whose focus was to spice up the gameplay. Admirable, since, admittedly, the series was in need of something new, and not something minor. Something resembling a substantial step up would have been welcomed, and an open world isn't a totally bad idea. I was attracted to such a prospect. But little did I know that not only would the open world completely sanitize any distinguishable features previous Dynasty Warriors games have, but that the company felt it was necessary for the games to strive towards realism. To reflect this, the combat was completely redesigned, and outlandish features characters had are either gone or backtracked a few games. Case in point, Sun Jian. A lot of you are probably outsiders, but what character design would you prefer? Would you prefer Armored Veteran, whose armor looks vaguely similar to other officers, like Zhahao Wan and Cao Ren? Or would you prefer this grizzled grandpa with white anime hair? Just on a visual level, which would you prefer? Because I know what I'd go for. It's weird that they chose to backtrack a character design to one from over 10 years ago, and if you're going to do that, at least bring back Steve Blum with it. And let's talk about the weapons in this game. One of the things I look forward to in new Warriors games is what weapons become available for new characters, because when you think they've reached the absolute limit, Omega Force surprises us with something really creative, and to prove this, I'm going to say what weapons were added in Dynasty Warriors 7 and 8. A yo-yo? This weird lance thing? This weird lance thing that looks like it was ripped off from Valkyria Chronicles? Levitating swords? A tonfa that doubles as an arm cannon? A garden rake? A scroll that does the fighting for the character? And a goddamn Okami paintbrush. There's so much character in these weapons. The fact that something as mundane as a rake was turned into a deadly weapon outside of The Simpsons, brought into a 1v1000 hack and slash game, and managed to make its work with the character is just ludicrous. Same with making a yo-yo deadly, and the arm cannon that's used by one of the most sickly and most frail of all the characters in the entire series. It's insane, and it adds to the charm. Not only were a lot of those taken away and thrown into the bin, but they thought it would be a great idea to take away weapons that were synonymous with established characters. Zhang He's awesome claws he's been using since Dynasty Warriors 3, into the bin you go. Huan Zhong's awesome bow he's become synonymous with, swapped with a sword. Cao Ren's shield sword that made him a recognizable character, out the window you go. I guess I should count my blessings that they didn't replace the Xiao sisters as dual fans, which leads me to question why they decided to go for a realistic approach when the product I am playing doesn't fully commit to it. But here's the strange thing. Even though the combat has been redesigned to the point that it feels like the mindless hack and slash system the critics call it, and that the grappling hook literally makes you unstoppable to the point that it comes across as tragic rather than funny, and that you have to pursue Lu Bu despite the series telling you not to do so since the second pissing game, and that the most amount of time playing the game is spent watching a horse's backside, and that the hunting is broken, and that the environment is lifeless and barren, and the fact that everyone sounds like they want to move on with their lives, and the fact that an entire stage can take hours to complete when previous games had them be completed within about 15 to 20 minutes. I felt that there was something still there within the combat system. I realised this when I forced myself to test out various different button combinations, and not just use the launch attack that's made the supposedly hardest of generals an absolute joke, and I found that I was feeling something like Dynasty Warriors here. The triangle button is completely disconnected from the square mashing, but using some of the shoulder button trigger attacks alongside the square triangle mashing did have me mildly entertained. It's why I think the biggest killer of the gameplay is the stop-start nature of it. Combat comes and goes too quickly, and if you kill a general, everyone flees and vanishes. But when inside castles that are densely filled with enemies and generals like the games of old, that's when I knew that this game was at least salvageable. Omega Force isn't totally incompetent, they're just misguided, and maybe they could make something out of this. They could actually fix this if they brought back that magical Dynasty Warriors
I was pretty dangerous in the past, but then I took an arrow in the knee.
I've got to get out of here.
I was pretty dangerous in the past, but then I took an arrow in the knee. I took an arrow in the knee. Hey, this is no laughing matter. I need medicine, or it really hurts. You with a bullet, you can't even catch a
Where do I begin with this line? Well, let's talk about how that line is a perfect representation of this game chasing trends several years too late, and having their priorities in the wrong places. Alone in the Dark 2008 was a game that had a lot of neat mechanics, especially the way fire behaves, but was bogged down by misguided controller techniques, and especially the open world of Central Park. It was criticised for trying to jump on the open world bandwagon too late, and not even doing it competently. The open world of Dynasty Warriors 9 feels like that. It feels like the designers saw a top trending gaming element and tried to haphazardly incorporate it in without understanding why open world games like Grand Theft Auto are entertaining to inhabit. Also, the gold rush for such a game is so long gone to the point that it's not even a selling point anymore. Some of the most successful and critically praised games of the past few years don't have what we would consider an open world. Which leads me back to the arrow in the knee quote, because it is the perfect representation of this entire game's presentation. I'm pretty certain that if you are watching this video that you have a good idea what arrow to the knee is and where it is from, but might not understand why it's got viral attention. It was a throwaway line that the majority of town guards from competing factions would spout out in an unenthused tone, regardless of gender. It spoke of how half-hearted Skyrim's execution of the world and gameplay was done, even though I loved the game anyway. In this game, it's there because it's a popular game thing. Much like the open world, the crafting, the resource gathering, all this was a desirable trend 7 years ago, but doesn't work now. I could blame this on either the developers or the localizers due to the finished product. Developers because of the overall game design, and localizers due to their background not being primarily in video games. Voice Group Incorporated was replaced with Vox Studios as the English localization company, and while both companies do have localization as a primary service, their mediums of interest are very different. Voice Group's website may be in dire need of an upgrade, but it displays a wide variety of expertise. Television, films, and games of different genres are proudly displayed on their website. Vox Studios primarily focuses on film and television localization, but their website doesn't go into any detail in regards to video games. They don't have a credits page, and trying to find what else they've done doesn't reveal anything. Vox are possibly working with Bethesda right now, but from what I've searched, Dynasty Warriors 9 might have been their first video game dub, and with no expertise doing video game voiceover, the end result could be that Vox did a grandpa and tried to sneak in a reference here and there. But they didn't need to. Dynasty Warriors has its own jokes and memes, lest we forget that Cao Cao was pronounced Cow Cow in games past, and this is the series that has this.
Feel the power of my magic!
But you know what's insulting about Arrow to the Knee guy? It's that it's just some random civilian who gives you a fetch quest. The majority of random NPCs have very generic voice lines that set the tone of the actual dialogue. This is a common practice in JRPGs such as Ni no Kuni and Nier Automata due to the sheer scale of the projects and the allocated distribution size. Normally this means that voice priorities lean towards major characters, with only the bare essential of NPCs getting voiceover. Those NPCs would normally be key quest givers or be part of an essential essential quest line that affects the final confrontation in the chapter. This NPC doesn't contribute anything. It's a self-contained quest that doesn't affect the overall campaign. It's actually a rehash of an earlier throwaway quest where you have to craft medicine, and someone thought it would be a good idea to not only give this guy an outdated dank Mei, but to give him a unique voice line. Was any person who bought this game amused by what he said? I had to walk away from the screen for 24 hours just because of how baffled I was. Even when I try giving this game credit, it throws about 7 different things at me that I could bitch about for hours. And that's why this game is so depressing. I grew up with this series. I loved this series. Even when I was in the darkest of places, I could rely on this series to bring me some joy and remind myself that not everything is bad. It was my bulletproof series, the one I could rely on in delivering what I desired. This game was about the presentation of its mechanics and characters, and they were thoroughly entertaining. But Dynasty Warriors 9 has not only broken that lovely barrier of safety, but actively went out to destroy and sanitize what made this series my comfort food. It's not the worst Dynasty Warriors game. I personally think Dynasty Warriors 8 Empires is the worst of the bunch, but the mainline series was reliable. Not anymore. The last ageless relic from my childhood has rotted away and exposed its vulnerability to ambition, and as a consequence, it has reminded me that I am no longer a young person. This game, without hyperbole, has reminded me that I am going to die one day, and nothing we ever did will carry over to what awaits us. This game hurts me emotionally. What should have been a big success story has instead sunk all faith I have in the brand. At least with other game series, the degradation was gradual, but Dynasty Warriors 9 was a sharp shock. Who knows? Maybe the Empires game could make better use of this functioning husk, but I won't be clamoring for it. I'm somewhat relieved about the Total War 3 Kingdoms announcement, and there's a movie due that might have the same charm of the games, but needless to say, I need time to recover. I'm not angry. I'm just really, really sad.